no parenting journey, I don't care who it is perfect. And there's a
Mm-mm.
lot of, there's a lot of remorse. There's a lot of, if only I knew
Mm-hmm.
then what I know that now. There's a lot of guilt. There is a lot of that because life's messy and
They
for
need to
some
gain
time.
their own independence and make their own decisions so they can own them.
This is a track. This is a phase. This is a stage of life that
Mm.
has to. You have to go through it. You can't go around it. You can't go under it. Like you have to go through it. So, and it's
Because if you
valuable.
skip the steps, you will pay for it.
You will pay for it. That's
Yeah.
it.
Have you noticed how many people out there are healing and likely struggling with life?
Whether or not people are actually talking about it, a lot of people are, and you might even be one of them.
If you're living the medical medium lifestyle, you may be doing the foods, the tools, the supplements, and still feel overwhelmed by the life part relationships, motherhood, identity changes, nervous system, purpose, and that quiet fear of, is it just me?
You're not crazy. You're not weak, and you're not alone.
I'm Eileen, an older mom, writer, former architect. And medical medium information saved my life, and my family and I have been living this way since 2012.
And I'm Amy, an autism mum, home educator, formerly worked in advertising, a near death experiencer, and we've lived medical medium since 2015.
Medical medium gives life saving information.
And here we support the life part so you can stay with it, trust yourself again, and come home to who you truly are.
Welcome to Rewild Renew, soulful discussions of life and truth. Hi, all. Amy and Eileen here with another podcast. And today we're talking about a subject, and I'm going to let Amy introduce the subject for you. So, Amy, what are we talking about today?
So today we are going to talk specifically about having children who are adults
Mm.
and perhaps hitting up against life, struggling with life. We have in the past we've talked about raising kids. We've talked about the early years of kids. We've talked about the teenage stages of kids, and we actually had a request through to talk about being a parent of children who are now out there in the world living as adults, probably on healing journeys, or parents at least who kind of have quite a lot of information about healing and illness and what we're up against in this world and the dark forces at play. This was a question specifically that spoke about the struggle of watching children find jobs, make friends, have faith, finding purpose. And they've asked if soul injuries and heavy metals could be playing a role in this, which is a really smart thing to ask, because the soul sits in the brain, which is where the heavy metals are present. So heavy metals can always interfere with soulful matters, and building a life is a soulful matter. It is that sort of manifestation of the heart, spirit and soul's desires and what you came here to do, and who you're building a life with, who's in your life, what you feel like your sense of purpose is, your sense of faith. These are all really important questions. So we want to dive into that. And Eileen, do you want to get us started on
Yeah, I
this?
think we should start with a couple of basics of human nature, if you will. When our kids are little, they're completely dependent upon us, and they go through stages. And there's a little bit more letting go and a little bit more self-discovery. But the teenage years and the young adult years are a very specific stage of life where they're they're trying to figure out their place in the larger world. And so it's actually in their nature to reject their family in some way, or put their family maybe not on the priority or the pedestal that they used to be on. And so that can be a really difficult thing for a parent to take in. We're having that conversation in my own house because I have a child who's probably going to live at home while they go to college. And it's redefining our relationships, because if that child was off at college, we would not be involved in their day-to-day lives as we are now. And so, how do you reestablish some boundaries as a child changes their role, grows up and needs to go expand? But but they're still living at home for health reasons, or which is our child's case. So, um, this is normal. First of all, it's just normal for your kids, 14 to 21, to just sort of not care or not want to take into account what their parents are telling them. So don't take it personally. I think that's really rule number one. Um, and I I have lots of stories around this because I have a big family. And I have a unique role that I played for many years in my family with the young adults in my family because my siblings were so much older than me that they were having children when I was still a child. So at some point, I was a little bit older than my nieces and nephews. So they kind of considered me one of them, but I was still a little bit older and I was their aunt. So they would turn to me as young adults instead of turning to their parents. So I do have a lot of personal experience with this kind of thing. And you it's heartbreaking and it's scary for the adult in the situation, but there's an old saying like you can't remove the stones from your children's path. You can't make the world an easy place for them. And as people going through the healing process, we're beginning to understand that like it's the struggles that make us strong. And so to sit back as a parent and watch your kids struggle, it's like one of the hardest things in the world to do. But it's actually normal and meant to be.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the struggle that provides the opportunity
Right.
ultimately, because without the struggle, there isn't the calling. There isn't there's no reason, there's no cause to have to reach for something. I always say to myself, one of the things I say to myself when I'm really struggling, when life becomes really hard and going through something difficult, I just say to myself, it's my struggle that keeps me close to God. Because there I am, like praying all day. I'm like not taking many breaks.
And having had struggles and reached to something other than God, and finding out what happens when you do that, those are also the path of a young person is to go, oh, that one didn't work. Because as human beings, we all wish that we could just be told the right thing to do, but we just seem to need to experience it for it to be a real lesson. So we need to let our teens and our young adults make those mistakes, just like you let your toddler fall when they were learning to walk.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of wisdom within it. But it's important to talk about parenting as the huge process that it is, from the very beginning to the end. And no parenting journey, I don't care who it is perfect. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of remorse. There's a lot of, if only I knew then what I know that now. There's a lot of guilt. There is a lot of that because life's messy and parenting is what you learn. You learn it on the job. There is no other training. Like you learn it there and then. And
And
each stage
and
is
if you
different.
became a very parent very young versus a parent like I did in my 40s, like it's just a different parenting journey.
Yeah,
And there's no right or wrong. It's just a different journey with parenting.
I have this conversation with my sister because she had her kids when her first child when she was like 21, 22,
Mm,
and so now her eldest is that age,
mm,
and my kids are still just going into like early teens, and so there's such a difference. But she just says like I just look back and I was just fearless as a parent because that is the energy of a 20 something, like
right.
in your early 20s. You're gonna live forever. Someone's going to help you pick up the pieces. It's all going to be okay. And then the older you get, maybe life's thrown you about a bit more and you become a little bit more cautious.
Hmm.
It's quite a different energy. Obviously it's unique for everyone. That's not
Hmm.
necessarily like a blanket statement, but it is quite common. So it's a very different experience having children younger versus later. That's one thing. But then to come back to what I was saying, like we have to look at that whole ride of parenting, and along that way there's been many things that you have been instilling in that child that are going to be useful to call upon in this situation when that person is now an adult. and your sense of the family values that you've instilled, that sense, that memory of what it is to be cherished. I know I say it a lot, and I know Christmas is gone, but like, I love Christmas for that moment, because it's like, I know that one day when life's hard, you're going to remember that feeling of like, of just being so adored and just having like such a wonderful day, like a perfect day. But all those memories, all that time is when you can, people are subconsciously pulling from that to inform their lives today, their choices today. And they might not look like it, and they might look like they're outwardly rejecting it. But it's doing a lot more. It's holding things together under the surface. Wouldn't you say? Do you know what I mean, Eileen? I think you could probably
Yeah,
explain it
so
quite well.
look, in a perfect world, if we were perfect parents, we would have, when they were little, provided them with the way I like to talk about it, or the way I thought about parenting as an older parent, is who had experienced a lot in the world and was experienced the world as a sensitive person. I kind of wanted to create this bubble for them when they were really little, where they could really, I was holding back the chaos and the darkness of the world so they can experience some joy, so that one day, and some compassion and some peace, and find that in the world. And because I knew that I, again, couldn't take the stones from their path that would make them weak. But one day when I wasn't around, or when I was the mom of the teenage kid who was rejecting me, that they had that memory of what peace and joy really is in their body, in their heart, in their spirit, in their soul, to turn to inwardly. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes we're not the parent we wanted to be, or sometimes we weren't parented well, or people have trauma from outside of the family that affects that. And so this world is just a hard place. So what can you do as a parent? Well, you continue to hold that space. You continue to be that pillar of strength, so that when they're ready to turn to you, when they're ready to ask you for help, and they can see, you're modeling what you're walking your talk at this point. They have that frame of reference to turn to when they get ready to turn to it.
Yeah. And obviously, like, Eileen is really only coming up to the beginning of that phase in her life, and I am not in that phase. But I do we work with younger people in these stages of their lives, as well as having had experience of people around. And sometimes, if it's not the parent, sometimes there's somebody nearby that can, because sometimes there's a block with the parent. Sometimes people are pushing their parent away, and they need to go through that phase
They
for
need to
some
gain
time.
their own independence and make their own decisions so they can own them.
Yeah, but sometimes there is somebody within the sphere that can hold that space for them. I can remember really being at a stage in my life of pushing my parents away in my 20s. Pushing them away, but kind of keeping them close, and but like, being in that difficult place. I remember it well, and I can remember sort of wanting to pin blame on them, because that's actually quite trendy, isn't it? Like, oh, my life was a mess, and this is, my parents did this to me, and I had trauma, and it's kind of like a phase you have to go through, isn't it? Like the blame thing, if you're reconciling difficult things from the past. And so I was in that space, and but there was this woman she was an energy healer that I went to see, and she was basically just that mother energy for me, and
Mm.
she was very steady, and I was able to get a lot from that. And even though my life was kind of quite chaotic, and I had some difficult things going on and around me, it steadied me. So sometimes there are angels that can show up, or there are angels that can work through people that can help provide that. And this is where you have to sort of remember how much power you wield still as a parent, because if we can just see it beyond just ourselves, like Eileen said, like, we mustn't take it personally, number one, but it's not all necessarily upon you, because the world out there is the teacher, isn't it? It's where we learn. But we can also, so we can find trust, and we can find the lessons that we need in many different spaces, particularly as we're out there more in the world.
I don't know if any of you experience this with your husband, but I do. And he and I joke about it now because I'll tell him something. And it's not that he doesn't believe me, but then I'll tell him it and tell him it and tell him it. And then he goes and hears somebody else say the same thing I did. And he comes home, he's like, guess what I heard? I'd be so mad at him. I'm like, I've been telling you that for years. He goes, I know, but right. In a
Yeah.
way, that's classic young adult or teenager. Like sometimes I just pray that my kids will hear what I need them to hear from, I want them to hear from somebody else because I'm not the expert in their life anymore, or they just want to reject anything coming from me. I've definitely had, I've worked with moms who wanted me to work with their teenage kids, and I go, I'll get on a session with them, but I'm can predict they won't actually get anything from it because I'm something their mom's suggesting, right? If they had found me on their own, it would be a whole different story. Have you experienced that, Amy?
Yeah, yeah. I have worked with some teenagers, and some are more open than others.
Yeah,
I will only work my, my standard is I'm only going to work if you want to be here. If you don't want to be
right.
here, there's the door.
Because you
Because
won't get
like
anything out of it.
you won't get exactly like it's just not it's a non-starter, and that's not nice for anyone. So
So sometimes as a
absolutely.
parent, what we're praying for is that they get the message somehow, some way, not necessarily coming from us, and that they have the discernment to see which is the right message for them.
And theory is one thing, and
Hmm.
lived experience is another thing.
Yeah,
You can know that I should not do this, or I should do that, or I should just get a stronger sense of faith, or I should find like this is my purpose, and I should find this, and whatever it is. It's one thing to just be told something. It's a completely different thing to have a real experience of
yeah,
what that looks like for someone. So, one of the things that Eileen and I do and have referenced in this podcast is before is we teach people how to do a shamanic journey, which is just the drum beat. It's just the but sometimes what it does is it puts people in this space where they can experience something, so they can get a reframe, they can understand something in their lives a little differently, so that it hits home. Because you can tell someone something, but when they say it back to you in their own words, you know that they've got it.
right,
And so, yes, it is that moment with the husband, which is classic of like, I've been telling you this for the past day, for like every day for 6 months.
right,
And now that someone over the road just said it, it's a thing, is it?
right.
But it's classic, right? And it's classic mum situation as well with kids. But, but it's actually good news, because it's like you wanted them to get this. Now they got it.
I
So
think too,
everyone's a winner.
coming from a place of non-judgment, being whether no matter what you did as early on as a mom, whether it was all right or all wrong or whatever, with teenagers and young adults, I think being in a place of non-judgment is really important. Coming from this place, yeah, I was 20 once. I made mistakes once. I remember a famous person, it doesn't remember matter who it was, but they were an older famous person, and it was in the news, some horrible thing they would had done. And they had done other horrible things. And my dad said, "This one I can't forgive." And I said, "Why? You forgave him this other thing." He said the other thing happened when he was 20. We're all young and stupid. He's not young and stupid anymore. He knows better now. And I was like, that was such an interesting thing for me to hear my father say when I was 20. Oh, everybody does stupid shit when they're in their teens and their 20s. So I felt like, oh, if I do something stupid, I can tell my dad and he won't judge me. I don't think I could tell him at 50 if I'd done the same stupid thing. But, to be this, and that's what my role was with all of those teenagers and young adults that were my nieces and nephews. I'll tell a very specific story. Um, I was in my 20s and I was with a niece who was a very young teen. And she and a friend came to me and said some young man had offered them marijuana. Should they take it? And I said, I didn't judge them. I didn't say, you shouldn't smoke pot. I said, do you know this person? No. I said, so do you know if the marijuana is laced with dangerous things? "Oh, no, we never thought about that." And I said, "I would never take it from somebody I didn't know. It could be laced with something horrible." And that actually happened to somebody in my family. And I said that to them, and they were like, "Oh," and they ran off and said no to the guy and stopped talking to him. Like, so they came to me because they knew I wasn't going to lecture them or judge them. I was just able to give them smart advice and let them make their own decision. Like, that's so I represented to them that person that they weren't going to judge, that wasn't going to judge them when they came to them with these issues, rather than asking another teenager should they take it with that and having no adult understanding of the consequences of their actions in the conversation.
Yeah. Let's talk about some like practical tools as well in terms of communication. Because I think when communicating with someone, especially on something difficult, one, you need to kind of have that compassion. So you need to know what stage of life they're in. That you're not, if you're in your 40s, 50s yourself, you're not sitting there having a cup of tea with a woman in her 50s or a man in his 50s, 60s or whatever. You're now talking to a younger person, and you have to kind of get back to what that energy of that stage of life is. That's the compassion, and sort of see the challenges in front of them. But then you've also got to have some respect for the fact that direct questions, they seem productive. They can be wholly unproductive. They can be like really counterproductive, quite honestly. So, in like Eileen's given a story about marijuana, and instead of answering it directly and saying, putting a sense of judgment in there, but it can be a direct question to ask someone like, what are you going to do about finding a job, or how do you feel about this, or what's going on with that? It can be so much more productive to not mention that at all, and ask yourself, what are the interests of this person? Like, does this person like music? Does this person like riding their bike? Can you do that with them? For one, can you start building can you build a relationship first? Because if that relationship is shifting and changing, or if there's something difficult, then firstly you have to get some trust and some faith in that relationship. You need to build a sense of safety. If you're asking someone to open up, you have to put some safety into that relationship. So how can you do that? Can you take an interest in their stuff? If they like music that you really hate, can you just like listen along, and can you dance along with them? And can you do something, give something of yourself, so that it's recognizable, and show an interest in other parts of their lives without judgment.
What books are they reading? What movies are they watching? What music are they listening to? Do it. My husband listens to every book my kids read since they were little, because he wants to know. He doesn't question them about it. He wants context for what they're experiencing.
Yeah, I do the same with my kids. In fact, my daughter just this weekend said to me, she said, "You don't understand me," because she's a teenager. And I said to her, I let some time pass. That's another tip as well. Just like let the time pass, and then come back in a different moment and just say, "I don't always understand you. I don't. You're changing.
Explain to me." Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, but the good news is that I'm open to finding out. And I used the example that I did a lot of learning about what autism is, because my kids have autism. I did a lot of learning about PDA, pathological demand avoidance, because this is a trait they have. And I was like, and that made me understand you better. And she was like, oh. And then I was listening to a song, and I said, "Do you want to listen?" I said, "I'm listening to this song. I really love the lyrics of this song. They mean a lot to me." I was like, this is a really good way of understanding people. You listen to this song and read the lyrics, because she likes to do that. She always likes to know what the meaning of a song is. I said, and you'll understand something about me in this song. So I made it a two-way street, and she really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But my daughter is a teenager. She's not an adult in the world, but the principle is there, isn't it? Like, think about the overall container of the relationship, that there's this space, because it's an evolving, changing thing. And there's some practical tools. So not having that direct question of, when we really want to talk to someone about something, we actually have to go all around the issue, and we have to make sure everything else is intact. You can't just rip down the walls. You've got to kind of make the foundations, and you've got to kind of put the other things in place. So That's
Well, that
one thing.
goes
And
to
then also,
something my mother used to say because she had 5 kids and she said every child was born different. Right. So,
yes.
and I know this is a thing people argue about. Some people want to just treat all their kids the same. My kids, I have two. They're so different. They have different communication styles, different love languages, different interests. I cannot, if I want to help them, I've got to some degree speak their language, understand them and the differences in them.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, this brings to mind how on a few occasions now, I speak to the parents of my younger clients
Mhm.
because it is difficult to bring
Look, let's
when
be blunt. Sometimes for the child to actually improve, the parents have to learn something. It's like the dog whisperer, right?
yeah,
It's not the dog, it's the owners, right? And this is not to blame parents. It's just to say that there's a relationship there. And if there are old patterns that are destructive and not good, then you um, it's a classic when a family goes to a family therapist for the therapist to pick one person that needs to the most work. But the truth is that it's a complex thing and people have behavioral patterns. And so one of the quickest ways to change um, a relationship is for you first to change. I know it's an
yeah,
old thing, and I never used to understand what that meant, but that's worked for me over and over again. If I want a relationship to change or something in my family dynamic to change, I change first, and then I watch other people treat me differently, react to me differently. So
yeah,
it really is sort of a two-way street.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that is something that I don't have younger children, but I adult children, but I know that I work with my young adult clients, 20s,
Mm.
30s, 40s. Having to work with the parents
Yes.
is sometimes a necessity because that it's really that the communication needs to evolve and needs to
It's
shift.
an
And
evolution, it's not a judgment.
no, no,
Yes.
absolutely. And
Yes.
so, getting really curious about the person. If somebody is also having a struggle in their life, a young adult, they're struggling finding a job or a partner or something like that, they're feeling it. You're feeling it as the parent. They're really feeling it too. And it's really important to look at the things that are going well in that person's life and focus on those. And, and it could be the smallest thing. Like, I really like that pair of jeans you bought. They just suit you so well. They can be the smallest thing, but you have to change the frequency of that chat from
Hmm.
being, you know, or that what's in that person's mind. They've got to feel like they're going to get something good, so they're going to have a nice experience with you, that you're seeing this. And people might be listening along thinking, yeah, I do this. Um and but that also goes to say, like, have those nice experiences. So when children are little, we can scoop them up, tickle them, cuddle them, smother them with kisses, and then as they get bigger, that kind of that changes. But the need the need is still there in a different way.
Hmm.
That need to sort of, like, sometimes have that affection poured upon them, or have those moments of laughter and closeness. It just looks different. So creating experiences for that, or talking about memories. Do you remember that time when you did that funny thing, or do you remember that time? It's like those oxytocin moments, isn't it? It
Hmm.
kind of creates that lovely, like, bonding between family members again. And these are those anchors that are important for difficult moments in time, because there will be many of them in a person's life, and you're sort of teaching them a framework of how to broaden out that perspective.
Well, you also brought up, you did all this learning about autism and PDA, pathological demand avoidance, and all of the learning we're all doing with medical medium information and healing ourselves. It kind of creates a tough situation because you see things that other people aren't seeing, and you see how they could be helped, and they're not seeing it, and they don't want to listen to you. And so it's a good problem to have in a way. And uh, uh, but you kind of have to just walk your talk and wait for the right moment. And if you're watching for that right moment, it will come. People will, I have had so many people reach out to me kind of privately. Um, I want to tell you, I've secretly been drinking celery juice and I feel so much better. And they won't tell anybody else. And I never actually had a confrontation with them or a conversation saying, I've seen the problems you're going through. You should have celery juice. They just watch what I do. And when they're ready, they come and ask me questions. And I had this recently with a family member, a young adult family member who's actually in the medical field. And I'm very familiar with whatever issues she has as I can be, and not, intimately in their life. But they reached out to me, just a text. Hey, my friend's got this health issue. Do you know what that really is? Because what the doctors are telling them isn't working. And my text back to them was, I do know what causes that, and I know how to heal it, but I don't think you're going to like my answer. And so we had a text conversation, and 48 hours later, the questions coming at me we're all in, and with bulleting questions. And so, you know, I've known this person since the day where they were born, and I've just stood my ground of how I live my life and not pushing it on them. But when the emergency arises, they're like, oh, maybe we should reach out to our Aunt Eileen and ask her what she thinks.
Yeah.
And I didn't approach it with, oh, you have to do this and you have to do this. I was like, I don't think you're going to like my answer, but I'll share it if you really want the information. So sometimes it's just continue to walk your talk, continue to be that safe place to come to when they're ready.
Yeah. And it was the struggle that was the catalyst for that
It
thing,
was the
wasn't it?
struggle that was
It
the
was,
catalyst, right? They actually had to go to doctors first and see that that wasn't working first. And then it occurs to them, oh, maybe something alternative will work. Maybe my old aunt does know what she's talking about.
yeah. And that's the struggle that you have to allow, isn't it? And
Hmm.
you have to have, I think it's a time to have to go deeper into your faith. It's so hard to watch people struggle, because even Eileen and I had spoken about this particular story, and you had expressed concern,
I did. It was
and
funny because literally, let's bring prayer into this. Literally, this person had a really great thing happen in their life. I have to be careful. It's not my story to tell. And I expressed to Amy, I was so happy for them, but I was also concerned because of what I know about medical medium information and people's health and what I know about her life. And I prayed. I said, please, I hope that, you know, only the best happens for her. And it was less than a week later that I got that reach out from her out of the blue.
yeah, and we
So
had that conversation at the time, like, when you said I'm concerned, and we're like, but it's the struggle that's going to make any
right,
change happen.
right.
So, having some faith and trust in that. It's actually written in the Medical Medium book about how a person's struggle is that they reach a tipping point where things become so bad that they're going to start fighting for their life. They're going to start doing things differently.
That's why I
So
say like the as a mother, you will see things that nobody else will see. And you might not be able to, do something about it actively, but you can pray. And your unique perspective, praying to your grandmothers and great grandmothers and aunties and uncles and grandfathers and praying to the angels, is not a benign thing.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And preaching, just making me think, preaching is not a nice space to be in either,
Mm.
for people to hear. I've noticed, if I go around saying, medical medium says this, medical medium says that, and you shouldn't do that because that's not good for you, and you should be
Well,
doing
that's
this
why
because
my
this is
husband doesn't
really
want to
good for
hear
you.
me, right?
Right. So I actually I live medical medium information every day. It's in everything, right? But I'm not actually name dropping it.
Mm.
I'm just not name dropping it because it's a turn off for some people, and my kids enjoy it. And but to a point, to a point. If everything that they're doing, and I'm like, well, do you want to know the medical medium take on this? Like, no, thank you. I just want to be a 13-year-old and do the thing,
Right.
So it's you've got to kind of honor that and check your tone.
I also think that giving people an opportunity to ask questions and being the person who can listen, you learn a lot about where they are and what they're ready for instead of preaching. But it does take a lot of compassion and presence to see what's going on with your children or with anybody and just hold the space and just wait for them to ask the question and or to just be that friendly, joyful person for them to be around until they are ready to ask the question and are ready to hear what you have to say. That's really hard.
Yeah. And also, you don't want to sit and wait for people to kind of hit their and because we're saying, like, you want to model that, you want to
Hmm.
hold strength, you want to bring some prayer because you do hold great power, but you don't want to sit in this righteous place. I like to tell people about my big screw ups. I find that's
Yes,
like that's kind of relatable. When
it's
I was young
true.
and stupid, yeah,
Mhm.
when I was young and stupid, I did these stupid things, and look where it got me. And look how I'm still unpicking that mess. And it's kind of it's important not to be righteous as well.
Mhm.
So to be like, I've figured a few things out because I did a lot of things wrong. That's
Right.
an easier, approachable space, especially if it's your own child who needs to be the authority of their own life because that's exactly what they're supposed to be doing at that time.
Yeah, yeah. And it is this big thing these days where I guess it's a trend. I see a lot of people talking about it on social media of just cutting off your parents or cutting off your child and in the name of boundaries. And sometimes that's necessary in abusive situations. So I would never tell anybody to stay in an abusive situation. But um, I do think that that's actually a dangerous trend ultimately for the soul. Because as Amy said early on here, um, uh, when you're parenting, you've never done it before. And even if you have, even if it's your fifth child, you're still going to make mistakes. We're not perfect as humans. And so, and in all relationships, I love to quote Amy, people are endlessly disappointing. She can give context for that. Like, there is no black and white. People do good things and they make mistakes, and they do wrong things and they learn from it. So, if we're expecting the people in our world to be perfect, we're going to be endlessly disappointed with everybody. Right. So a a nuanced thing where and when to hold a boundary and where and when to have forgiveness and understanding for people's humanness.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of making me think, about how difficult it is to hold a space for
Mm.
people that, this is the highest of stakes, our own kids going out there bumping up against the world, figuring out themselves, figuring out a few things about the world. It's such a difficult space to be in, but that inner strength is something that is felt. So, I always think, like, what's the job of a mother? Because that's the question I ask myself. And I think one of the things is to really hold so strongly who your child is, because they're going to lose that sense at some point, and when they do lose that sense, you've still got a hold of who that person is. This is much like what
Yes.
me and Eileen do when we work with people, either one-on-one or in groups. It's
Hmm.
like we hold. I was explaining this to someone actually. They were asking my process, and I was like, really, you're saying all the words, you're telling me about your life, but what I'm doing is I'm feeling everybody who I work with feels different because that's
Yes,
their soul, right? They
that's
have a
right.
different feeling. And when someone says something and it doesn't fit with their soul, I'm like, no,
Right.
that something is off there. So and so some you've said something there that is a mistruth. And when
Hmm.
someone says something that's right, like, especially when it really resonates, I've got those full body goosebumps. The reason why I'm saying this is that you can hold a sense of someone for them when they can't do that. And that's such a wonderful thing to do for a person until they're able to pick it up again. And they will know it and they'll feel it. They'll know that on some level you're doing this for them. And that will strengthen someone when they're going through a hard time.
Um, I remember my mother once when I was in my early 20s. Um, she would say things to me once in a while that would really strike me, and she was really good at waiting for that opportune moment to say it. She would just say, "You know what I've observed about you and your friends?" And she would come out with some statement. I was like, "Oh, damn, she is right. She is spot on, right?" Um, but I know that I was child number five. At that point, she'd probably learned a few things about, and my older siblings, just to be blunt, had made some pretty devastating, life-changing decisions in their early adulthood. So I think she'd learned that lesson the hard way that you can't force people to do things. Um, but you can be there to help them pick up the pieces, and you can, in that right moment, give that observation that only a mother has, and it can hit.
Yeah. And doing that, it builds the relationship because it
Hmm.
says to the child, I can trust here. I'm safe here.
Hmm.
So those kind of things are really, really important. So I think, in summary, it's letting go to life, letting life be life. And also one more thing actually is not succumbing to the limits of life.
Hmm.
The limitations, because yes, it's hard to go out there and get a job, and we can listen to what's happening in the world politically, economically, and you know and then we can start to feel those limits really come, like, how will we ever get a job, and how will this work, and you know we can start to feel pigeonholed into a space,
Hmm.
and we got to kind of like shed those limitations. Sometimes that's a really difficult space to be creating a life. So keeping that door open is, I think, is a really important energy to bring into a relationship where there's possibility, where there's hope, there's trust and faith. That's a soulful thing. But
I
yeah,
as
I
a
think,
I as a
yeah,
parent have to keep my fear in check because I joke all the time. I don't know whether to send my kids to college or teach them survival skills in the world the way it is now. And but the truth is like I cannot know ever what they're going to be up against. And so um I'm better off being the soft place to follow the example of living, walking my talk, of being more of a an anchor, so that when they go out and experience things I will never have had to deal with, um, they have a base to come home to, or a base idea of values and morals and way decision making and discernment that they can call from.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think, in summary, I think the person who sent in this question, the fact that they're asking,
Yeah,
shows a
means
great deal of
everything.
care.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a curiosity there for
Hmm.
how can I support. That is the answer. It doesn't
Right.
mean that the answer is solved, because the story's not done, and the story's not going to be done in a week or so, because this is a phase, this is a stage of life that
Mm.
you have to go through it. You can't go around it, you can't go under it, like, you have to go through it. So, and it's
Because if you
valuable.
skip the steps, you will pay for it.
You will pay for it. That's
Yeah.
it. If you just, like, switch the off button for a while, you're going to miss some really important
Hmm.
opportunities to really gain power along the way and bring that to your soul. So I think asking the question is
It's
important.
everything.
And if you're asking, you'll find the answers as well. And there are
Hmm.
angels to help support with the answers. There's divine help that can help bring those answers and orchestrate those answers. and just stay open to that inspiration and that intuition that will come.
Yeah. And remember back when you were 20, like a humbling moment, right? And it helps me to say, okay, right. This is where they are. It'll be okay. We can move on from here.
Yeah, there's a reason why you don't have a lot of fear in your 20s. You
Hmm.
have a lot more as you get older, because you wouldn't throw yourself out there. You know, it's all
Right.
perfect by design. It's like,
Right.
you ever watch those nature programs where there's a certain species of duck that like nests right at the top of the tree, and the first thing the little chicks do when they hatch is they have to like throw themselves 30 feet down. To sort of like to start life. It's like, well, they're probably like well equipped for that mission. I wouldn't want to do it. Trust in the process, people.
Yeah, yeah. All right, everyone. Whether you are a young adult or the parent of a young adult, it being, Amy, you said this in our young adult show, it's a time to build.
Yeah.
You're curious, you're building a life. You want things, you don't know if you can achieve them, and you'll get there. You'll get there. And drink your celery juice.
Talking of not preaching,
Right.
drink your goddamn celery juice. I love that.
All right, remember everybody, drink your celery juice. Remember just how powerful your soul is, and don't give that power away to anybody today.